Let's go to a place where everything is made of blocks, where the only limit is your imagination. Build anything you want, with no rules to follow.
Recently, I've been looking at products online that I can only afford if I sell my left kidney, and one particular product that caught my eye was the iPhone 12 Pro Max, which cost about $1,300. And if you look up laptops around that price, you can find products that have 3 times the capacity and cost less. Even a MacBook is cheaper. So if a phone has this much value, surely you can do something better, or at least close to what is possible on a laptop, like making games. Now, I won't be using an iPhone because they're a very greedy company that don't let you download free RAM from perfectly safe sites. And I'll be using an app called Max 2D, which is a 2D game engine available on Android. I've messed around with this before and I've used it for about 3 months before starting this project. Now, the main thing I thought about was the design. I looked online for 2D sprites for the game, but I didn't find anything that looks like what I wanted. I then found an obscure Discord account who was also working on something similar and asked him for sprites. He only gave me 3 block sprites for some reason, so the rest of the game art was going to be made by me. When it comes to the game terrain or map, I was planning to build it all by hand, but after taking 11 minutes to place 8 blocks, I started looking for a way to automatically and randomly generate the terrain. I joined the Discord server of the app and everyone either told me it was impossible or it will crash. But I persisted. So I went on experimenting with a project that generates a block when you touch it, and it crashed. At this point I was really lost and I decided to do more research and found someone who managed to do this perfectly. So I reached out to him and he was kind enough to give me a sample to test with, and after 2 days of trying, I understood exactly how to execute this. How this works is both simple and unique. Just for easy understanding, I'll use this box. Essentially, the block god pushes a cursor every time it gets too close to it, and every time the cursor changes position, it drops a block there. Now it's basically automatic and all that is needed is to make the terrain have somewhat of a random feel. With the use of a random math method, I was able to do this in a way that the blocks are only 1 step higher or lower than the one before it, or the same height. And now I just need this to make 7 layers of dirt and bedrock under it. The first attempts were very disappointing because of the weird results, but I later on realized this was my fault from some few miscalculations, and it now seemed fine and worked normally. If you notice, the terrain generation is incredibly slow, and that's because if it gets really fast, even after building the world, the frame rate drops to 4. Now I had to make Steve since I couldn't find it anywhere online. I did some bits of observation and found out that Minecraft has some form of a voxel art style, which just means small blocks joined together to make a shape. After looking at a screenshot of a Discord account showing his own version, I was able to measure the dimensions of the Steve model. I tried making the sprites in a pixel art editor and everything seems okay until you try making the arms. So I used something else and it looked half decent, so I used it. It turns out Steve's height is 1 block and 15 pixels, but I hate conversions, so I will use this other search result that says it's 2 blocks. Since everything was set up properly, I added movement mechanics and it surprisingly worked. Since the movement and terrain generation were set up, it was time to implement building. I used the terrain generation system to spawn these sensors that spawn blocks when you tap on them, but there were parts that the sensors did not reach. So the obvious solution to this is to spawn the sensors on blocks and literally everywhere, right? No, this just fries the frame rate. In order to make this even playable, I had to make the stupid decision of making the earth flat so the sensors can be where I want. And even after this adjustment, the frame rates were still dog shit. So the only sensible way to get a decent frame rate is by cutting down the amount of blocks and sensors by half. And this works really well now, but the map is too small to do shit. So I thought, what if I take away all the sensors? And it rendered 400 less objects, which is 4 times better performance even without reducing the map size. Now you're wondering how I'll spawn blocks without the sensors. And a while back I made this small project that spawns blocks when you tap on the red button, and the joystick was basically used to control the direction where the block will go. Since I was basically using the joystick for placing blocks, I had to design a new movement system, and the jump button in this game is used for placing blocks. Now everything is working perfectly, and I'm not even being sarcastic. The only disadvantage here is that the building is a little bit too difficult compared to this, which is more organized. But to reduce the difficulty, I added an arrow so it's more clear where the blocks are going. Alright, let's see if you can notice what's missing here. A. Fortnite, B. Fortnite, or C. An inventory system. That's right. So I made an inventory system. I only added 4 items because the logic for setting up only one item is already really complicated. And if you're wondering how this would be beatable with just 4 items, just follow along and it will all be clear. I've set up the logic, and when you tap on the pickaxe, you can break blocks. And when you tap on the blocks, you can use the joystick, and there used to be a jump button to place blocks. I also made those smaller blocks that appear when you break most blocks, so it can be collected. I then created 2 other blocks, which are obsidian and netherrack, and set them up exactly how I set up the dirt blocks. I decided to add just one enemy in the overworld, and I picked the zombie because I thought the AI was really simple to configure, and I instantly regretted this. I started by adding the zombie to the actual game, and it was basically harmless at this stage. Now the common practice to make enemies attack here is to tell them to follow the player. And it seemed normal, but I soon started seeing the bugs. Put a block in front of the enemy and it's stuck. The enemy falls in a hole and it's stuck. Always getting stuck. I immediately thought that the solution to this is to just tell the zombie to jump when the X velocity is equal to 0. And in theory that sounds like the perfect solution. But if the zombie slows down for 1 millisecond, it turns into a balloon. But a better solution here is to make the enemy jump if it touches any blocks. This will make them behave like rabbits, of course, but this works extremely well. Of course there were some few bugs, but in time I fixed it and this is literally unstoppable. And since the enemy can climb literally anything, I brought back the random terrain generation. Now that this was all set up, we just add a life bar. I was planning on placing it in the top left like the original, but I prefer it on the player. Since I've laid down what I wanted, I started working on a portal which is used to go to the nether. While setting up the portal script, the app crashed and I lost all the scripts for the enemy AI that took forever to make, and I was really upset. But luckily enough for me, I went through the recordings and I was able to find a single frame with the script I was looking for, so I was able to recreate it easily. I also added a void because the original has it too. Now where were we? Yeah, the portal. This is how it works. You destroy 5 zombies and will you look at that, you get a netherrack block. And when you place this block on the portal, you can enter the next world. The portal is normally in the same position, but the terrain isn't, so you can get it really high or really low, depending on how lucky you are. We're pretty much done here, so it's time for the nether. I replaced all the dirt blocks with netherrack and tried to get the nether look. And hey, look over there, the void is now lava. For the enemy in the nether, I went for the wither skeleton. Looking online, it was hard to find a 2D side view wither skeleton, so I just used this 3D model as reference instead. The results were extremely debatable, but since I made it, it's an automatic 10. Now in the nether, for some reason this big box drops out of the sky, and you're meant to break it while getting attacked by wither skeletons that spawn infinitely. Inside the box, there are 3 obsidian blocks that you collect, and then get the fuck out of there and back to the overworld. Since I was back to the overworld, I made some adjustments to the look and created the end portal which can be opened using the obsidian blocks from the nether. Alright, I know the end isn't made of obsidian, but I never noticed my mistake until I turned the background black. So look, I fixed it. Now I had to make the dragon in 2D. I did try to recreate it on paper and it looked interesting. I looked online for something less concerning and found this ender dragon toy. It had no wings, which is actually smart, as the wings in the game have a very weird shape. So I used Steve's model to start making the dragon. And there we go, now it's in the game. Now what about Enderman? I mind my business in the end, and it still attacks me. So I put it in a cage for pure enjoyment purposes. I made the end have a flat look, because it's kind of flattish, and made a script for the Ender Dragon to make it go around the terrain repeatedly. I'm not sure you've noticed this, but the Ender Dragon destroys blocks when it touches them. So I also added that feature. I wanted the Ender Dragon to shoot fire when it's in the same X position as the player. But this never works even if it should have. So I used an alternative method by adding this long sensor to the player, so it can tell if it's in the same position. Now when they're in the same position, the fireballs drop every time. And this dropped too much at first, and if the fire blocks were not just blocks for testing, the aim here will have been to last longer than 15 seconds. So I reduced the amount it makes and made the fireball destroy anything in its path. After some few adjustments, I think I was okay with this and made some close range attacks. If the Ender Dragon is defeated, you get a lot of rewards. Not that much, that's just a bug. And the portal behind is open for going back to the overworld.
And the fucking idiot actually watched to the end.